Welcome to this episode of the Talent Forge, where we are shaping the future of training and development. Today, we have a special guest who is known as the Wizard of Ops, Emma Rainville. Welcome to the show, Emma.
Thank you so much for having me, Jay.
Yeah, Emma, I'm really excited about this conversation because I think it is something that in talent development and learning development, we often see kind of a failure to really think about long-term operations or how to structure our operations. But before we do that, let's get you acclimated to the audience. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this space.
Sure. I am a fractional COO. I work with multiple people in direct response coaching mastermind spaces. I stumbled upon it on accident. I was a COO of a large service company, an HVAC company, the largest HVAC company in Texas.
Hmm.
And life happened and I needed a remote job. So I started doing SOPs for direct response marketers. Then I became the COO of a company. Then I grew that company. Then I grew it some more. Then I started a fractional COO service. Then I started a customer service agency. Then I started a media agency and just kind of exploded from there. Like life just did it for me. But I found that I have a true passion for operations and I have a true passion to help visionary leaders who are trying to impact the world in a positive way. I really enjoy helping them make money doing it, and helping them help as many people and touch as many lives as we can. Because I have no ability to do that. So I have to integrate it somehow.
I love it. So I do want to dig into that COO experience because from a talent development perspective, oftentimes, it's the operations officer that's really got their finger on the pulse of the entirety of the business. And when something is brought down to L&D or to the talent development space, oftentimes they're told, we need a training on blank. And the COO or the executive team, they may have a bigger vision, but that doesn't mean that that's always translated. So if we're in talent development and the COO or the CEO or whomever brings that sort of directive down, how might we be able to get more information or how might we be able to establish a conversation to better understand, okay, what's the real need here and how do we operate forward to make sure that we're hitting the business objectives? Can you comment on that?
Absolutely. I'm going to bring it back a little bit though, Jay,
Okay.
because I think a lot of people in the space don't have COOs. They don't find it important enough to spend money on,
Mm,
which obviously I feel is a mistake. But
sure.
let's just go with that. Because I think that what you'll find is either the COO isn't a true COO, they're more like a project manager or a product creator named COO. Very few people in our space are true and real COOs that know how to run a COO role. So I just want to put that out there.
Now that makes a lot of sense.
I also believe that in the space of helping people, it isn't actually that hard to run operations because the business is so simplified. So let's go back to your question on what if there's a new course? What if there's a new initiative? What if there's a new training that needs to happen, a workshop, whatever? I think that the easiest and best path for anyone ever, whether they have a CO or not, is to start with a foundational framework. What is your vision? Who exactly is your avatar that you're trying to help? What are you trying to provide them today? And what are you going to provide them tomorrow? Because that allows us to strategically plan how we position everything from our members area that may not be able to support future products to our merchant accounts that may not be able to support future initiatives and products and coaching. And it just really sets what we're doing, why we're doing it, and who we're doing it with.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
there's a
and
lot less
outlining, getting that up front seems to make a lot of sense, right? Because then we know what
tons.
our employees have to do to provide that promise of value.
Right. And we're also using a lot of vendors a lot of times. So
Mm,
being able to say, I help people lose weight, or I help people build businesses, or I help people grow their portfolios, that's just not enough. We need a true vision, a true mission, a true purpose, a true cause, a true avatar, and true uniques that we can articulate easily for vendors and employees that are on our behalf serving our clients. And so
right.
that's like the first and foremost. And I can tell you that every single person listening goes, Yep, I have that. Go ask 5 people that you've worked with over the past year what your vision is, and none of them will say the same thing. I'll
Mhm.
guarantee it. I've worked with a lot of clients over the years, over 1,000, and I've never one time had everyone be able to articulate it that didn't go through my WAVE program prior to coming on. So we have a program called WAVE where it's written vision, absolute focus, values driven future, and execution plan. You come for 3 days and do that. So some of our clients had been through that and they could articulate it, but outside of that, never ever sunny weather. So
Well, and I love that you bring that up because I do think that it is a huge challenge across
yeah,
organizations where you don't have a solidified mission, vision, value, set of values or things that are kind of determining your future
right,
decision making or how you're going to operate or how you're going to show up in a time of a crisis or those types of things. And while everybody has it on their website as a marketing tool,
right.
it's not being used as an
That's not it.
organizational tool.
That's not
Yep.
it. And that's not it anyway. That's
Yep.
never it anyway. A true vision has where you're going to be in a year. What are your commitments to getting done this year? What milestones have you hit at years 3 and 5? And what is the big picture on year 10? What services we're providing? What offers do we have? What products are we selling? What's my involvement in the business as the visionary leader or owner? Spokesperson, coach, CEO, like where do I live here 10 years from now? And so a vision is far bigger than a 3 line mission statement or marketing strategy.
Right.
And so really sitting down and creating that generally takes about 3 days. And once you have that, though, it gives you so much insight into how to make decisions for the business because you know exactly what you're trying to accomplish. And then the second component is creating an operational framework. So, what's the framework that we live and breathe by in the business that allows us to reach the vision? And the reason why that's important is you've said it twice now, reacting. You've used the word reacting twice. And a lot of times as business owners, we're reacting. I don't react, I respond because I have a
Mhm.
plan. And my plan is very strategic. I know what I'm doing. I know what my purpose is. I know what my focus is. I also know what things I need to be signaled to pay attention to. And when those things are out of place because I've created that plan, I don't need to wait until there's a burning fire that messes up my entire day. I can see that things are starting to smoke a little bit and I can get that under control long before it turns into flames.
Yeah. And that reaction is oftentimes where L&D feels because it's
Right,
getting a directive put down. So my friend Jess Almley talks about this all the time about moving from being an order taker in L&D to being a strategic partner.
right.
Now, I know what might be going through the head of some of the people that are on here. Okay, Emma, I hear you. But I'm not at that table. I don't get to make those decisions on vision. I don't get to make those decisions on, what the direction of the company is. Basically, all I'm getting is from either COO, CEO, or whomever down, this is what we need. End of story. Let's move forward. Is there a way to approach having a better dialogue with maybe some of those decision makers or people that are setting up the frameworks for us?
Yeah, I love this question as well because if you're responsible for the product you're responsible for, or if you're responsible for the outcome and you're not responsible for the vision, you have to make sure that you've checked your boxes in order to deliver what is expected of you. And if you don't, it's very unlikely that you'll meet expectations. I don't know a person that knows how to anticipate expectations that they haven't been given,
Right?
including myself after years and years and years of working.
I've
Um,
tried. It hasn't
Yeah,
worked.
it absolutely doesn't work. And so, but here's the easiest path forward to having a sustainable relationship with the hierarchy that doesn't understand that you need more direction. And that's I don't know a company that doesn't have or wouldn't upon request get you a project management tool
Okay.
and you build out what you believe the offer, the product, the course, the whatever it is that they're asking you to create. Is it a workshop? Like, what are you creating for people? And you build that out in a project management tool as a project complete in full
Okay.
so that it isn't just because generally when you get a directive from a higher up, pretend it's a fitness company. Go create a 7-day journey of metabolic eating that will help burn fat with 7-minute workouts each day, accompanying them for weight loss and energy.
Hmm.
That can mean so many things.
A lot of things.
And so if I go and I create a complete project on where I'm going to start, a whole checklist of I'm going to hire a nutritionist. They're going to give me recipes. I'm going to have a shopping list. I'm going to create the meal plan. I'm going to create the workouts. We're going to book a studio so we can film the workouts. If you have it all there, and then I say to you, hey, Jay, you wanted this done. Would you mind taking 5 minutes to look it over and make sure that I've understood your direction well and correct me where I may have made a mistake? When you take responsibility and ownership over, I don't want to use the word failure, but over the failure to understand the actual mission of the task, then your hierarchy is going to be not only way more likely to look at it, but also way more forgiving when you didn't get it right because you didn't build it yet.
Yep. Well, and that's a powerful lesson that also comes even from design thinking. I know we've talked about design thinking on this of get the prototype together, and that doesn't have to be a final product. That could be a cardboard prototype for as far as that goes. So that way we can at least kind of test it, get an idea, is this hitting the mark? Is this helping us hit our objectives? And, are we on the right pathway? So I really, really like that. The other thing that I heard you say, and I think is really powerful is putting together the project plan. So from a learning development background or from a learning development or even HR, when we're putting some kind of an initiative together, it's almost like we start with putting the content together rather than putting the organizational structure together. So this really does encourage us to really think about go back to the basics, get the objectives down, get the resources needed down, get the research and timing down, and all of those things before you actually start putting the content together. So I really, really love that project management focus.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, go ahead, Emma.
I was just going to say one of my favorite parts about that is I can eliminate 20% of projects just by the first thing they open is the budget
Mm.
because they didn't realize they didn't even like it just seems so easy and a visionary entrepreneur, someone who's trying to truly help people that understands what needs to happen doesn't necessarily understand what goes into making the products that help them make that happen for them, if that makes sense at all.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, when once you start seeing, production costs and everything else, uh, I'm not even joking when I say 20% of the time I'll be told, let's pause on this when they realize the resources that are involved.
Sure.
Rather than all the executives and management or ownership being upset because you're halfway through a product, so they have to go through it with it because you've already spent half the money and they didn't even think it was going to cost a quarter of it.
I love that. So, and it's so true because there are a lot of these different moving parts, and some of them are absolute barriers, and I can imagine where budget would be a major one. So, let's shift gears here for just a moment. And now I know that you've been working with as a fractional COO, and you've been helping organizations set up operations. But I'm going to put us into the context of, all right, I am in the L&D department, or I'm a trainer inside of that space, or hell, I'm even in the HR department. How can I use concepts of strong operations to really help myself in navigating? Because every HR person I've talked to, every L&D person that I've talked to is overwhelmed, burned out, doesn't know which project to start, which project to close, how to prioritize, etc. Could you maybe talk about what are some best practices from the operations side of things that we could be thinking about to incorporate into our talent development space?
I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it really is going through and creating that foundational and operational framework. Within an operational framework, just so we can be, I'm going to go backwards just a little bit
Yeah.
and shamelessly self-promote. I wrote a book called Scope, which is a foundational and operational framework. It walks you through it. And so Scope is setting your vision, creating processes, operational excellence, people development, and execution. No business works without all five of those. No business works fluently, profitably, and within operational excellence without those five
Mhm.
components. So the execution plan is the most important part for what you're talking about. So when I have the vision, I know where I'm going, I know what I'm doing, and I created my initiative for the next 10 years, and it's a picture, right? Like things are going to change drastically as the world changes. AI changed everything. Robotics is changing everything. And we're going to continue to grow and those things will shift, but my year one commitments, I don't need to figure out what my priorities are 3 months into my year, 4 months into the year, because I already created them. I have an execution plan of what I'm going to do this year. I have commitments of what I'm going to accomplish. And then priorities are already set for me. So as there's always going to be issues within businesses and fires that need to be put out, but there'll be a lot less because I planned. And as they come in, I'll be able to look at them and prioritize based off of consequence of them existing, right? Their mere existence. But overall, new projects, new products, new initiatives, new events, new whatever we're doing in our business is already planned out. So I don't need to figure out where the pieces go, getting nothing done because I'm spending so much time trying to figure out where the pieces go because I took the time to strategically plan over here. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah, so setting up that sort of guardrails in the very beginning. How would one go about starting that process? What does that look like in actual application or implementation?
Sure. So we generally do like a 3 day, just completely shut off of everything. I like to do a Friday to a Sunday only because as business owners, we really to just completely shut everything off for 3 days in our business usually isn't, unless you've got a massive organization, usually isn't possible.
Mhm.
So I like to do a Friday because a Friday isn't that big of a deal to take off to a Sunday. And I sit down and the first thing I do is I look at my personal life and my professional life. And I look at both because you'll build your business to ruin your life. People do it all the time. You dream big, but you didn't think about, I have two kids, or I wanted to have kids, or I have a spouse that I didn't write into the daily plans. I'm 10xing my business every year, but I forgot that I need to go on date nights. And I forgot that I need to go to soccer games, right? So I take and I put them side by side. What do I want for my personal life over the next 10 years? And what do I want for my business life? And I look at that part really, really quickly. It's like if the ghost of Christmas future came and got me in the middle of the night and brought me to my bedroom window, what would my life look like? And then he brought me to my office window, what would my business look like? It's that simple on 10 years because you can't go too deep there. And I always work backwards in order to get there and have those things, what do I need to have done in 5 years, both personally and professional? And then I do the same thing for 3 years. And then my 1 year commitments are really easy because I know in 3 years I got to do this, in 5 years I got to do this, in 5 years I want to have this. So, what do I need to do this year to get marked off the list so I'm on track for my ultimate goals and where I want to be? So, that's the first thing. So, that's written vision. The next thing is what am I absolutely focused on? If you don't have an absolute focus, you're throwing wrenches all the time. You're seeing shiny objects all the time. And you're never focusing on the thing that truly makes impact for the people that you want to serve. So, an absolute focus looks like I'll make one up. It's going to be a purpose or cause. So, our purpose is to help anyone who's willing down a path of complete mind, body, and spirit health. I don't.
Sure.
That wasn't great, but you get the idea. And that would probably be somebody who's making products for people to have mind, alliance, chakras, whatever, right? So that's what I'm absolutely focused on. So when something comes into my sphere, I'm asking myself, does that align with my absolute focus? So if there's a building for rent or a building for sale and it's a great price and I can make a bunch of money on real estate, does that align with my focus?
Probably not.
No. So I get to start a new LLC or throw it in the trash. I don't get to bring it into this ecosphere. I keep it safe from that because it's not what I'm absolutely focused on. Then we're going to do values driven future. We spend so much time understanding our customer avatar. How come we don't spend time on the avatar that is our employees and our vendors that are serving our customers? So you're going to sit down and you're going to spend time really understanding the values that are important to you for the people that work for you, work with you to serve your clientele. And that's anywhere from 4 to 6 attributes. So mine, you have to be a proactive problem solver to work with me. If you see that a problem is going to happen and you do nothing about it, you're probably not going to be with me very long.
Sure.
Integrity is really big for me. It's really important to me. People who have a we over me mentality, who want to serve the group rather than just themselves, is important to me. And so you'll come up with 4 to 6 of those, and that's the values that everybody who is in your organization, both vendors and employees, and you and your executive staff, have to maintain and hold value to 365 days a year.
Okay.
And then finally is the execution plan. So I have my 1 year commitments. We talked about that earlier, remember? So I've
Hmm.
got my 1 year commitments. Great. What happens when you tell a bunch of people to do a bunch of things and bring it back to you in a year?
Well, in a lot of cases, they come back and do it about a week before it's due, if
Right.
they get it done at all.
If they get it done at all, it's I forgot, I didn't realize, I didn't know. So we create an execution plan. The way that we do that is we're going to break down the first quarter. We're going to look at what we need to accomplish the first year, and I want to know what I need to get done the first quarter. And what I'm always thinking about is I need to get all of these done by October. Because I promise you, things are going to come up and things are going to happen, and resources are going to be needed that we didn't think about, and it's going to get pushed back. So if I have it set to be done in October, I'm definitely going to get it done by the end of the year, right? So what do I need to get done in Q1 by March 31st, 2025? What do I need to have accomplished of my quarter one goals? And if I'm coming out with new products, maybe it's the research and development. If I need to build a new members area because I really want an interactive members area that's proprietary to me and I'm having built, maybe it's, hire the developers and create the development plan. So I'm going to have all my Q1 goals. But now what? What happens when you go and you hand people things and 3 months later come back? They're not done. So we set up, depending on the company, weekly or bi-weekly, what I call breakers. It's a break from working in the business to working on the business. And all of your key players that are responsible for those quarterly goals, they're going to sit with you and they're going to go over each one of their goals, where they're at, what they accomplished this week, what resources they need, where they're struggling, what they're worried about. Is it on track? Is it off track? What's going on? You're going to know everything about it every week or every other week. The odds of them not completing that task when you do that every week or every other week are slim to none as long as you've given them the resources they need.
Sure. It sounds like, I mean, this is that principle of execution, the concept of being able to see, being able to track, being able to look is no different than, taking a trip and being like, how far have I gotten this day of driving? How far have I gotten this day of driving? It's not like you're just going to one day, you're going to drive for 6 days and then all of a sudden be like, where am I? So that makes a lot of sense. Now, again, from the learning and development perspective, without being the CEO, without being the person responsible for per se growing the business or 10 timings the business, can an individual in an organization or maybe the leader of the L&D team, the leader of HR, could they do this process or think about this process from their own position, even if it's not the full company perspective? It seems like you could probably adapt this at the divisional level as well. Would that be fair, or is that
I
something?
have customer service agents that go through this and customer service agents that
Okay.
go through this and create this
So
for
front
themselves.
line, actual like
Eh,
front
If
lines.
your executive team is not providing it for you and they're paying you, why wouldn't you
Solve the problem.
solve the problem? And when you can display true leadership, what happens to your career anyway?
Generally, it accelerates.
I hear all the time, "Oh, that's not my job." Well, that's probably why you'll always have a job. Make a
Or
career,
not
make
have a
a,
job
or
soon.
not. Right, right, right. You have an opportunity to take control and be a leader. And so why not? And if you're not going in the right direction, you just make sure that the person you directly report to can see, like, hey, I don't have any initiatives. I'm just, kind of working every day. It seems like, we should have some initiatives. Here's what I created for myself. Would you give me feedback on that? And if they don't like that, go work somewhere else.
Sure. Well, and I like that because that's essentially if the guardrails aren't being put out for you, set your own and then,
Right. You're
get the permission.
self-responsible. You're
Right.
responsible for your own life. You're responsible for your own life. If someone's paying you and you don't feel fulfilled, go make yourself fulfilled. That's your responsibility, nobody else's.
Well, and I think the important thing, and to kind of draw this around to a lot of the challenges that we face, right? Like in many cases, L&D doesn't end up having, or HR doesn't end up having a voice at the big executive table. So we don't get to make those decisions. We don't get to push those decisions or anything else. Then we're somewhere in between that executive table and the frontline employees, having to both serve the employees and serve the organization. But without some of this knowledge at that top executive level, it becomes a guessing game. It becomes okay, you want
I
a
mean, you can
sales
implement
training.
this into anything.
Yeah.
You can implement this into anything. Everybody has a job that they have to do every day.
Yep.
If you're responsible for a marketing department, make your goals and your initiative, reviewing all the SOPs and figuring out where you can eliminate, elevate, automate, kill, and delegate. So there's something that everyone can do here.
Well, and I really like the absolute focus because I think once a L&D team or an HR
Mhm.
team can establish even their internalized what is our absolute focus, because a lot of the fires that you're talking about is extra work that's handed down ad hoc because we just happen to be there,
I call
or
it throwing wrenches that are actually shiny objects.
yeah, and sometimes that work can be rewarding, but other times it detracts us from the rewarding work that we were doing in the first place. So
Right.
being able to say, hey, is my focus on engaging and empowering our employees, or is it really on doing X, Y, and Z that you've just asked me to? And even challenging that is, I think, part of that process of being able to be a strategic partner rather than an order taker. So, Emma, from your experience, and let me put you into the context of you are the operations officer. You're the chief. You're this fractional COO for a company, and we're just going to say maybe a small to medium sized company, maybe 50 to 150 employees. But they bring you in as the fractional COO. And you're having to work with the HR team on, making sure that the processes and systems are in place. And under HR is usually talent development. What are some of the ways that you would engage those teams as a leader? And what would you expect from those teams as a COO?
That's a really hard question, mainly because I think that if you notice, there was a P in scope, and that's people development.
Hmm.
It's so important to develop your people. Often, business owners really do forget that.
Yeah.
And so, your team that has tribal knowledge, if they elevate and grow with the business will grow faster than having to replace them. And so, you really, really want to develop your people. But back to your question, you have to meet people where they're at. No one is met in the middle and you created great change or great influence. You have to meet people where they're at and then help them, walk them to where you want them to be. And they have to be willing, right? So the
Hmm.
first thing I like to do is assess the team. That's the very first thing I need to do because I'm going to do something different with almost every team. Are they super motivated? Is the morale good? Is it not so good? Like, where do I start here? To make them A, trust me, to build rapport, and then to make them raving fans of their own products, because that's so important.
That trust makes a lot of sense because I can imagine some scenarios where, hey, we're bringing in a fractional COO and
Everyone's
everyone
getting
goes,
fired. That's what
oh
everybody
my
thinks
God.
immediately.
Yeah.
Everybody immediately thinks they're getting fired. And so then the next thing I am a big, big, big advocate of team building. Companies that don't spend time and money on team building are costing themselves a ton of money, actually. So I always like to start with five dysfunctions of a team with any core
Lencioni's
group.
work. Yep.
Absolutely.
So, hey,
Absolutely.
I'm pausing. Audience, listen to that. Cut cut that sentence out that Emma just said. Play it for your leadership and get the funding you need for team building because it's absolutely true. If your team's not connected, you're going to have a toxic culture. If they're not working together, they're going to be working against each other. There is no middle ground there,
There's
and
no way around that.
yeah,
There's no way
absolutely.
around that.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
It's
that's
so
okay.
important, and it's one of those things where I think it sometimes gets turned to, oh, team building, that's a luxury. We'll do that if we have time, energy, effort, budget, resources. And it's like, no, actually, if just like a relationship that you are in, you can't just give it attention here and there and assume that everything's going to be okay. You've got to be investing into that relationship, and that is organizational wide. So I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you.
No, thank you. And team building doesn't have to be expensive. It
No,
also doesn't have to be time consuming. One of the first things I did when I didn't have any money and was starting out my company, and I realized like we were growing a little bit faster than I had spent on the team, except team building has always been a big aspect of my career prior to having my own business. I simply bought the book and sent it to everybody. And then everybody read it and came and talked about it for an hour.
yeah, yep.
Obviously that morphed over time and we got together and we did more things and we spent more time on exercises and stuff like that. But I mean, it doesn't have to be time consuming and it doesn't have to be expensive, but it is absolutely necessary because if your team can trust each other and your team can be vulnerable with each other and your team is okay of letting go of ego and everybody wants the best for everybody else.
It's huge.
It's huge because we win together, but guess what? We lose together. If one person wins and five people on the team lose, everybody lost.
Yep,
If two people on the team win and three people lost, but they all worked really, really hard together, everybody won.
yep. And,
So,
and that's the thing too, is we're more willing to do and put in extra effort for
right.
people that we like and people that we're connected to and people that
Absolutely.
we can rely on as much as they rely on us. So,
And we're willing to call them out. I don't have a problem calling anyone out. I cannot have ever met you ever. I can get in a boardroom. I'm a different animal though. Most people won't say, "Jay, I hear your idea, but I think that it's going to be bad for the business because if they don't know you and
sure.
they don't trust that you're going to be able to hear them and not hate them for it." Like how many times do you think a day that people hear things that they should speak up about but don't because they don't want to hurt someone's feelings?
A lot. I generally am of the same cut and kind of lean into Brene Brown on that of clear is kind,
Same,
unclear is
same,
unkind. And if
same.
I'm not telling you that you have a booger on your nose, no matter how awkward that conversation is, you're going to hate me for it later
Because
eventually.
30 more people are going to see it.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. So, yeah, continue on that pathway though, because I think that this is the relationship between that executive function and L&D or talent development. That relationship. So we've got team building, we've got in getting to know the team, getting to understand them, but that relationship's so essential. And I think that whether it started by the COO or whether it started by the CFO or the operations team or anybody else or the L&D team, somebody's got to start it. So, what else would you recommend in sort of bridging that relationship gap between, um, we're going to say, I don't want to call it middle management, but,
Let's call it middle
oftentimes,
management. It's
yeah,
often middle management.
yep. So,
It's
how
very,
do we do
very
that?
often middle management. And so companies freak out about meetings.
Yeah.
And I've heard some of what's supposed to be the greatest leaders of our time say that meetings are wasteful and useless. I think meetings are highly, highly important. I
I,
think that connecting with each other and as a middle manager, you can take everyone that you're managing. There's no reason you can't get them even on a 30-minute powwow and just say, "Hey, I'm here to hold space for you. What are
yeah,
you working on? What are you frustrated about? That's all I want to hear about today. How can I resolve some of that? How good does that feel when you're an entry level person or a low level person working your ass off?
yep.
Like
Well, to your point, I would say that maybe 20 years ago, 10, maybe even 10 years ago, I would have been an anti-meeting person like this is a waste of my time. Why am I doing this? And so on and so forth. And I would say that it was by learning like structured meeting
right.
protocols, like
Have an
Robert's
agenda.
rules. an agenda, and
And a
making
start
time.
time and an end time.
And I
There
make
has to be
time.
an end time.
Yeah,
And yeah.
and to your point, all of my meetings have built into it time for connection. But that's actually like, hey, we're going to spend 15 minutes talking about this current event, or we're going to spend 15 minutes learning about what just happened on blank's vacation. But it's structured. So then there's an expectation, kind of what you were saying earlier. There's an expectation, there's guardrails, and the meetings finish on time and they move forward appropriately. So I think when people do lament meetings, and correct me if I'm wrong or challenge me if you, usually when they lament meetings, it's because they're not running their meetings in a structured or efficient manner. Would you
It's
agree with that?
100% I agree with that. That's exactly right. And you have to have a purpose.
Yeah,
And I will say this though, the one time that there is no reason for a purpose and you really do need to have this, it does have a purpose, but not really, really, is if you're in a situation where you're a leader, not a manager, a leader, and you're mentoring your people, you probably need to at least once a quarter have a no agenda 60-minute with them
check
where
in
you
type.
just check in and you let the conversation go wherever they want to take it.
Yep. I start those. I
Those
do
are the
those with
only
my
ones, though.
team.
Those are the only ones, though. Even me and my husband, he'll be like, "Do you want to talk at 6?" And I'll be like, "Can you send me an agenda? What will we be speaking about? What do I need to have prepared?"
Yeah, I do those with my team, and I have one question that I kick it off with. So, what's on your mind? And then we go
Mm.
from there, and that's it. And it starts with whatever's on their mind. Well, I've been thinking a lot about X lately. Tell me more about that. And just really digging in, and the conversation blossoms. And of course, we get to the 60-minute mark, and they've talked for 45 minutes of it, and they're excited to keep going on it. So you can have a really powerful meeting with no agenda if the agenda is to just let's get people talking, connecting, and exploring different ideas or innovating or whatever that might
But
be.
that should be when you're mentoring someone.
Right.
That shouldn't be the average meeting that you have with every single staff member ever. So yeah, I agree completely.
So these are some great operational aspects. If I was to ask you, and I know one of the things, I know you've worked with entrepreneurs and I know you've worked with organizations. If you had one big piece of advice, one thing to maybe even just think about to get started, and I know we've talked about a lot of really great tools here. We've talked about having a project management plan, we've talked about the scope, we've talked about Wave. But we all got to start somewhere. And sometimes when we got all of the things, then none of them get done. If you were to guide me and say, this is the first things first and the most important thing that if you do this, you're going to have exponential returns, what would that one thing be, Emma?
You're gonna hate this because I've already said it, but it's the foundational framework. It's the
So it's
foundation.
starting there.
Understand, it's really just before you do anything else, before you spend any money, before you start an LLC, before you do anything else, understand what you want to do and who you want to serve and who you want to have by your side to serve those people.
I don't hate you, and neither does the audience, because I'll tell you that consistency and being able to say this really is not only important, but it's essential. And it is the first things first that you should be doing, in addition to it being a really valuable tool for setting expectations, guidelines, guardrails, and essentially where do you plan to be? If we don't have that plan of where we're going, well, then all the work that we're doing is just kind of questionably, are we getting to what we actually want? So I don't hate you for it. I actually admire you for it in really kind of focusing on that purpose. Emma, if our audience wanted to get in touch with you about operations or about your best-selling book, Scope, or if you want, or the Wave or any of these types of things, how would they connect with you?
Sure. So I think the best way to do that would be specialopspodcast.com.
Okay.
We have a visionary vault there. My book is on there. But I have something called the Visionary Vault. It's my members area. You want to see how to run a members area, go there. Sign up. It's free. I never ever try to sell anyone anything on it ever. It's every course, every stage I've ever spoke on, every webinar I've ever done, every seminar I've ever done, every workshop I've ever done, everything I've ever created is in there for free. Operationally, I believe that goodwill brings goodwill. So I have that for people. You can go sign up for it and just consume all of it, and it's all yours.
Love it. And that was specialopspodcast.com. And we'll make sure that's in the show notes so people can get in touch with that members area. Pretty cool. Emma, thank you. You know, talking about operations is not always something that L&D or HR does. You know, we really try to focus just on the people, which is obviously a part of it, right? People development is part of the scope. But getting to that first things first and maybe having that vision and understanding where do we really want to take these people? What are our absolute focus? What are the values that we're bringing into the space that we share with our audience? How are we going to execute? And really thinking about it in that project sort of focus, I think is really powerful. And it's something that L&D or HR may not necessarily do. So I think that the tips that you gave and the ideas that you gave really solid and definitely going to help the audience in crafting. I've even got some ideas for myself of like, hey, maybe I had to revisit some of these things. So I want to say thank you for joining us here
Thank
today on the
you.
show. Yeah. And thank you, audience, for tuning into this episode of the Talent Forge, where we are together shaping the future of training and development.